We're talking LA Chargers football on the Our Lads Football Network, Our Lads Football YouTube channel. Whenever we talk about the LA Chargers here on Our Lads, we welcome back Alex Insdorf from Bolt Beat. I just want to make sure I don't get this tongue twisted with breakdown.
It's a little
So
tough.
you got the Bolt Beat contributor and also the host of Bolt Breakdowns. Thanks for doing this, Alex.
Thank you for getting through that tongue twister. I know it's a little more challenging than usual.
Now you got Bolt Beat along with Bolt Breakdowns, so hey, why not?
Alliteration.
So when we were talking to you before the season began, there was obviously a lot of optimism with Harbaugh coming in, and it's so interesting when I think back at that first week or two. I remember thinking, even though in our preseason predictions, I actually picked the Chargers to make the playoffs because I just felt, well, I don't know why anybody's not picking them to make the playoffs when everybody predicted them to make the playoffs when they had an inferior coaching staff. Now they have a real coaching staff. Oh, yeah, but they lost Keenan Allen and their receivers. Receivers nonsense. I mean, Jim Harbaugh knows how to coach without wide receivers. And but yeah, still in those first couple of games, you such a difference with the team with where they are now. But I can kind of I understand that because I remember watching Michigan play as a fan under Harbaugh, and that's the way it was with Michigan. It's like it takes a while, especially when you're learning how to be a specific type of team. Like the Chargers are learning how to be more disciplined. They want to be more physical. The transformation has been really excellent. And even though they're far away from being complete, it's been an excellent turnaround so far this season.
Yeah, no, I think so for sure. And you talk about not just the job Jim Harbaugh's done, he's been great, but Jesse Minter, their defensive coordinator, has them as one of the top scoring defenses in the NFL, which Incredible. If you told me, if we were going through the depth chart, and if you told me they were one of the top 5 scoring defenses and were like that in the league, I would not have believed you before the season. Plus they've also sustained a lot of injuries. They didn't have Denzel Perryman against the Chiefs. They haven't had Asante Samuel Jr. at corner. They have had these kind of injuries throughout the season, but have managed to kind of sustain on both offense and defense, and are 8-5, which is better than I would have predicted before the season, and also puts them in good position, obviously, for the playoffs, given the state of the AFC right now.
Yeah, let's jump right on the injury list because
it's like a Star Wars like credits. So you go down the names.
Yes.
But I mean, I do think it is a huge credit to the coaching staff that you can have not only the defensive side of the ball players I just mentioned, but also I forgot to mention J.K. Dobbins and Lan McConkey, who did not play against the Chiefs. Dobbins on IR, and they were still able to keep that game, pretty competitive right down to the last possession. And you don't want to necessarily take moral victories, but I also was not thinking, ooh, that's going to be a 1 or 2 point game at the end of it with, losing your 2 most productive offensive players.
Well, out of this list here, these are the guys that are on injured reserve, either short or they're done for the year. So out of this list of injured reserve players, who are they getting back?
Yeah, so I think the plan is to eventually get Dobbins back, who suffered the knee sprain against the Ravens. So this is the 2nd week I think he's been on IR now. So this will be his 3rd game missed. So I believe he'll basically be able to come back in a couple weeks. So that's the big one right now, just because, he has over 700 yards of the season. It's been a great comeback season for him. And the run game, as good as Gus Edwards, I think, has been serviceable. They're getting production out of Kamani Vidal, but Edwards was their workhorse that they were willing to put 15, 20 carries per game on and take some of the load of that offense. And so I think you have him that's going to come back. They hope to get Hayden Hurst back, I would assume, at some point. Brendan Rice, Semi Fehoko, wide receiver. More their offensive skill guys that I think are kind of, their disappearance right now on the roster is felt, I think, in the game. And Alohi Gilman at safety, who will also probably be back at some point this year.
Okay, so Gilman on defense, Gilman should be back, and
Mhm.
Samuel.
It's been a weird storyline for him. So he's been eligible to come back off of
Oh,
IR for a couple weeks now, but they have not
okay,
activated him off of IR, and so we don't really know what's going on there. If there's
okay.
more to that story than injury or not, but the team claims that he's still injured, so we kind of don't know.
Do you feel like the team has missed him?
Uh, well, they've gotten really good production out of their rookie corners in Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart, who played really well. Um, I do think they miss him in terms of a depth perspective, but I do
Okay.
think this starting group that they have right now with Christian Fulton on the outside, you have Tarheeb Still on the outside, Cam Hart on the outside in that cornerback rotation, and then Jossier Taylor in the slot. I think it's a group that they really like and is what they're probably going to kind of pivot to after this season anyway, with Asante Samuel Jr. being a free agent after the year. I think Jesse Minter and his defense, they like having more of those, sizable corners, I would say, in the defensive back group. If you look at Michigan's defensive backs, they like having those types of players who are, physical tacklers. And I think that has been the benefit, not the benefit, but I guess what you've seen as a result of Asante Samuel Jr. being injured is that they have been able to get some significant snaps and reps for
Yeah.
Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart, as they will probably be the starters, assuming they make the playoffs.
Yeah, Steele was actually Arled's defensive rookie of the week after
Yeah,
the Atlanta game. So
yeah.
absolutely. Okay. And also, how about Gilman? How much do they miss him?
Yeah, I think they've missed him in the safety room. They've had a couple safety injuries now because they have Tony Jefferson, who also missed last game with a hamstring injury. So they've been kind of cobbling together the safety room with Elijah Molden and Marcus May playing with Derwin James. So I think the hope is that you get as many of those safeties back, and then that kind of allows Derwin James to play all over the field, the more healthy safeties that you kind of have around him, and they like using him as that defensive chess piece.
Okay. And then offensively, of course, the big names, as you mentioned, well, one is on injured reserve, but Ladd McConkey,
Yeah,
what an incredible rookie season he's having. And it really happened. It seems like he just took off in the last month. It just seemed like it was okay. Everything was going to rise, getting some catches. But then all of a sudden, you looked up after about a month later and you're like, wow, I mean, this guy has
yeah,
been really a big part of this offense.
yeah. No, he's been amazing, and I mean, I think you really saw it in the first half of that Falcons game. He had 107 yards in the first half alone. He was just going off, and honestly, a lot of the other wide receivers and Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer, I think before the Chiefs game, where both of them had good games, they had some not so great weeks. Quentin Johnson in the Baltimore game, in particular, came up with some pretty big drops, and Ladd was really kind of I would describe him as almost like a one-man wide receiver room with how much production he was putting up offensively. And he was one of the more pro-ready players, I think, coming in terms of his
Yep.
route running ability. A lot of questions about size and injury, which now he's dealing with. But when he's out there, he looks like a player, not a rookie. He looks like a player that's played the position for a number of years, and that was kind of the wrap on him coming out of Georgia.
How long, much longer do you think Disley will be out?
Disley did not practice today. It
Okay.
sounded like his injury will be a little bit more extended, but they tend to make their decisions on whether to put guys on IR around Saturday. So that's when you would probably know if he's going on IR. But so far, they have not placed him there yet. So
Okay.
maybe they're hopeful they can get him back before that 4-week timeline.
And what do they do long term if he does go on IR? Because they're not very deep at the position,
Yeah,
which is one of the reasons that they signed him and was their most expensive free
right,
agent, even though he didn't make a lot of money. But
right.
it was the most expensive free agent that the Chargers signed. And it also shows you how and we talked about this in the preseason about how much Jim covets the tight end position, which is what we're going to see for sure. And this tight end class is so amazing coming out.
Right.
There's any doubt that they're going to use a high pick there. But how does it look if Dissly's out for extended time?
Yeah, I think that's probably when you have to go into the free agent market and like see which guys are available, see who you can sign to the practice squad, and kind of cobble this team together. Stone Smart had a really good game against the Chiefs. He had four catches. He was PFF's highest graded player of the week. Bailed the Chargers out at a couple moments. So he was really feeling himself against. Took advantage of Dissly's injury. Took advantage of Hayden Hurst's injury and really stepped up in a big spot for the Chargers in that Chiefs game. So I think they're going to, kind of ride the wave a little bit and see if they can get more production out of him. And then they have Tucker Fisk as sort of their blocking tight end. Scott Matlock is their fullback. And then after that, you probably, that's three guys. I think you probably have to go out and sign somebody. They worked out, I want to say, Albert O, who was recently released by the Eagles a couple weeks ago. So that's, potential move that can happen there if they want to look at the tight end position from previous guys they've worked out. So I think that's probably what you would see is more just scouring the free agent market and seeing what you can find at this point.
Okay. How's DJ Sharks? I know he has not been the player they had hoped they picked up, but the fact is he has been hurt. But even though he's not hurt anymore, they're still a little disappointed about his joining the team. And I know he came up with one big play early in the game, and then that's it. He kind of didn't see him again. So what's going on there?
I honestly, coming out of training camp, I had expected DJ Chark to pretty much be the team's second or third receiver in the rotation. He suffers an injury prior to the Raiders game, goes on IR before the first week of the season. And he was on IR for about 8 weeks. So, whatever, groin, they haven't really given details, but whatever groin injury he suffered, I think has limited his mobility a little bit in terms of, what we associate with DJ Chark is kind of the fast wide receiver you saw in Jacksonville or Carolina or any of these places, the 4-2 guy. But, if you watch him on tape against the Chiefs, he wasn't that. And, he hasn't necessarily been that guy for a couple of years, but I think they were hoping to kind of have a little bit of a career rejuvenation in that way. But the injury setback he suffered in training camp prior to the regular season beginning, I think has kind of put him behind the 8 ball a little bit, unfortunately. And so now they have to play him because Jalen Reagor is going to be out for a decent period of time. McConkey, obviously, we'll see we'll see whether he plays, how many snaps he's able to play, dealing with knee and shoulder sprain. So he's going to have to play either way now, and also incorporating Darius Davis in addition to that current rotation they have now of QJ, Josh Palmer, and McConkey.
Is it more likely McConkey plays this week, you think?
Yeah, I think it's more likely. I think it depends on how conservative they want to play it, and also, how well he feels in terms of movement. That seems to be more the issue in terms of why he didn't play this week. So, yeah, apparently against the Falcons, he went in the game until they had to take him out because, he couldn't move on that knee sprain and was also dealing with the AC joint sprain. So hopefully that movement that he has and the pain is less this week. So I do think it's more likely. He registered a limited practice today. So, they're hopeful, I think, that he'll be able to go.
Out of the offensive line, who has been has there been any pleasant surprises, players that have stepped up their game, and then the exact opposite, anybody that has been a disappointment?
Yeah, I mean, Joe Alt is just immediate, Pro Bowl level guy from day one. that he stepped in there, and I think that's greatly benefited the Chargers. Obviously there was a lot of debate during the draft. Are they going to take a receiver? Are they going to take a tackle? Harbaugh takes a tackle, and Alt has really looked like a professional the whole season. I still think he's in like single digits in terms of pressures allowed for the whole season. He just has kind of lived up to every expectation that they had, even playing the opposite side of the line that they had him playing in Notre Dame. So he's been great. Obviously, Rashawn Slater, is a Pro Bowl level guy. He's been great. So I think the real question is the interior, and they had their issues against a guy like Chris Jones against the Chiefs, and that's also a question against the Buccaneers, who have Vita Vea and a really fearsome, interior pass rush. I would say that Bradley Bozeman, I think, has been passable for what he's been, but the real two questions on the line, I do believe, are Trey Pipkins and Zion Johnson at left and right guard. And if you're talking about something on the offensive line that probably limits, this team's potential going forward as a playoff team, I do think that is how Herbert will have to, protect himself from potential pressures given up on the inside.
Quentin Johnson, you briefly touched up on him. Mm-hmm. Was the Baltimore game, because I hadn't noticed that he had any of those drop problems this season until the Baltimore game. But again, I don't watch the team all the time. I'm not saying he hasn't dropped any passes before then, but it just looked like that game looked more like last year. Other than that, he's been okay. Am I wrong, or is he really not improved as much as I thought he has?
I think he definitely has improved. I think what you saw in the Baltimore game and even a little bit in the Cincinnati game, they have wanted to, kind of make him that true outside X receiver, who's catching, post routes, corners to the sidelines. They wanted him to do that. And Quentin Johnston is not really like a contested catch type guy. I think, his best work that he's done this season is over the middle of the field, crossers, slants, feeding off of, maybe some broken coverages that happened in the defense. And I think that's what you saw in the early part of the year. So I think he has improved at some of the nuances at playing wide receiver. I think when it still comes to contested catches, though, that is where he still will kind of struggle from game to game. It'll be a little bit dependent because you saw kind of a step back against Baltimore, but then against Kansas City, he made some tough grabs that I think that 3rd and 16 he converts as a linebacker's about to, blast him in the face.
Yeah.
I was fully expecting him to drop the pass. And he holds on to it, right? So I think maybe that generates some positive momentum, for him going forward. But I think, it really is an issue from an individual game standpoint, because once you have one drop, then you're, playing the confidence, right? I think that's what he's been trying to kind of work on this season. But for the most part, the drops outside of that Baltimore game have been better.
And then, defensively, it's amazing. I remember watching the opening game, and Puna made a play early in the game, a really good play. And ever since then, he's had a really good season. It's like, wow, Puna Ford's back. That's playing his best football of his career. That must have been something that I'm not sure they expected this, but he's been a major reason, hasn't he, of why this Charger defense has played so well.
Yeah, I think this past game against the Chiefs was actually the highest, pressure rate of his career in terms of pass rush win rate. So he has been going off this season. I make the joke on the show that he, took a time machine back to 2020 after he did not get that opportunity with the Bills. The last couple of years with Seattle were not necessarily his best, but he looks back to full strength, playing in this defense. And they've needed every bit of his help, on that interior line. And then you have obviously Khalil Mack and Thule and Bosa on the edges. But he has really opened up what this defense can be as both a run defense and the amount of pressure that they're getting on quarterbacks in the interior.
Who was also surprised? We talked a little bit about the rookie corners, but overall, who else has been a pleasant surprise? Thule obviously has taken another step. We talked about that possibility in the preseason, but a few other players that have stepped up.
I think Dayon Henley, the linebacker who has started for them, he's the green dot. He calls the defense, as Jesse Minter wants to call it. He's been great. I think he's played at a Pro Bowl level, which I didn't necessarily expect coming into this season.
Okay.
He pretty much from game to game, you've just seen consistent improvement. Was a rookie last year, played a lot on special teams, more so than starting. But yeah, just has been a super athletic, great tackler, and has pretty much done everything they needed. Even in coverage, he has some of those instincts. He played a little bit of safety previously in college, and played on the offensive side of the ball in high school. So he definitely has a lot of those key athletic traits that I think they want to see in their linebacker room. So he's been great in the middle of the field.
How about the other two rookies? Have they contributed much?
Yeah, I think, you look at Cam Hart and Tarheeb, who are their starting corners basically now at this point. And Junior Colson, linebacker out of Michigan, obviously, he went on IR a little bit earlier this season and came back against the Chiefs. So they're kind of still waiting to see from him. He's had some injury struggles going back to training camp. I think he missed part of training camp because he had his appendix removed, and then he had the injuries during the season. So they're kind of still waiting to see it from there. But it's obviously tough to play rookie linebacker, as Dayon himself, learned last year. So I think they still have high expectations for him going forward. But yeah, I would say not a miss as far as a pick. They still have very high expectations for him, but it hasn't necessarily been the rookie year they wanted because of the injuries for Colson.
Okay, let's talk about the matchup, and this is going to be a real good one. Tampa Bay is coming in playing some really good ball. They've won 3 straight. They're now the NFC South leaders, and they're going to have to hold off Atlanta. And since they don't know the tiebreaker, they have to hold off Atlanta. So it shows you that, and their schedule really opens up nicely after this. So this is their last big test. And if they can win this one, it could really help solidify their standing as far as and even if you take a look at the opposing trends, these are good spots for both teams. The Bucs have covered 9 of their last 12 as a road dog, while the Chargers are 8-1 straight up ATS this year as a favorite. So they're really in a good. This is Chargers. They're supposed to win games. They win them. That's been their MO this year. Of course, at some point, maybe it comes towards the playoffs. Maybe it comes next year. At some point, then you have to step up and win the games you're not expected to win.
Right.
But they're taking care of business. That's also important when you're rebuilding, even though this looks like a quick rebuild, and we're not really surprised about that. Next week, the Chargers have the big one at home against Denver. But let's talk about this one first. What have you seen so far about the Bucs that you think might give the Chargers the most problem?
Yeah, considering Herbert suffered an ankle injury against the Chiefs, that is really where I'm honed in on this week, because you have the Buccaneers pass rush coming in. You have Vita Vea. You have guys all over that defensive line that I think can give the Chargers offensive line a lot of problems. And yeah, I'm really looking at that, and it's kind of, we saw how Herbert played with an ankle sprain earlier this year, and then he finally started to feel like himself by the Denver game. But this new ankle injury he picked up against Kansas City, how well is he able to move against that Tampa pass rush is kind of what I would watch. In the secondary, they're not going to have Antoine Winfield, which
That's
I would
big.
say that is a win for the Chargers a little bit. But I am still a little bit concerned about this game. Just also the Buccaneers, as you say, are really hot offensively coming in to this game.
Oh
too.
yeah,
they're top 5 in a bunch of categories. And they're getting it without necessarily top talent. They don't have Godwin. They are missing some offensive line pieces. They haven't even necessarily gotten the best games out of Baker, who I didn't think played that great this week, but they still, they still won. So that offense that Liam Cohen is really working with has been good, even after Dave Canales left to Carolina. I think that this is going to be a challenge for the Chargers, a little bit of a different offensive look than they've seen the whole season.
Okay. What specifically is it? Because they do bring a two-back backfield, and Irving has been really good as a rookie, so it's been a big help. I know the Bucs didn't, even though Canales was good enough to get a head coaching job, they didn't run the ball effectively under Canales, but they sure are running the ball effectively. And again, to be fair, Canales didn't have Bucky Irving and Rashad White.
Yeah.
And Sean Tucker is a number 3, who's a pretty good number 3 running back too.
Yeah, and I think the running game has opened up a lot of what they can do in the passing game too. And as Mike Evans gets back into the fold, he came back from injury. You have that and the run game working. I think it's a little bit of a challenge, especially if they can get some passable offensive line performances. And I think that's what you're seeing with this offense is the strength of that running game.
Yeah, besides Winfield, there's also, as you can see, all those players in red are injured players.
Yeah.
Some might play, some might not, but there are injured players that are not on injured reserve on the depth chart here at Ourlads, and you can check it out. The Bucs.
It does feel like December football for both the Chargers and the Bucs going into this game.
Absolutely.
With all the red and injured reserve on the depth chart.
Yes. By the way, if it goes down to a really close game, what about Dicker? I know he had a little bit of an injury earlier this year. It hasn't been the year that I expected. I expected after a solid start to his career that maybe he was just going to really put it together. But again, sometimes you have an injury that could stall you. And if you're scoring touchdowns and not field goals, that's a good thing. But overall, has he been effective when healthy, or has what's the deal there with him?
Yeah, no, I mean he's kicked I think 93% of his field goals this season. He's around 90% for extra points as well. Been really solid. There was a kind of moment in the Chiefs game where Harbaugh was on the Chiefs 38-yard line.
Yes,
he opted to punt.
I was going to ask you about that. That was what, a 56-yarder?
Yeah, it was about a 56, 57-yard field goal, which is, common for Dicker's range. He hit a 59-yard field goal earlier this year. And then Harbaugh was asked about a post-game and was kind of like, well, maybe I should have taken the field goal there, right? Does that change the end of the game? Who knows? But I do think, the Chargers, I think when they cross the opponent's like 40-yard line, I think their mentality is to kind of be a little bit more conservative and play field position, especially when the Chiefs or the Ravens can take advantage of field position if you give it to them. I think that might change based on the opponent, right? Like you can be a little bit more aggressive against some not necessarily the top teams, but then it's like, okay, well, it's the Chiefs and the Ravens. Like, you got to be a little bit more aggressive on fourth down and some of those positions to score when, you kind of have to play perfect to beat those teams. So, it's a balance, I think, with the Harbaugh coaching decisions. But I think Dicker has been fine this season.
And before I let you go, two more things. First of all, we'll come off of this Tampa Bay matchup with your feeling on the game. What does your gut tell you? I know it's still middle of the week, but what do you think about the game? Chargers need this one, considering you don't want to go 3 out of 4 on the losing side. Which is kind of why I'm leaning towards the Chargers in this one, because again, Tampa Bay's even though both teams are banged up, losing Winfield is just a key guy. I mean, he's probably I think he's the best defender. So, and again, I think the Chargers are a little bit more desperate to get a victory. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they've also, shown a pretty good reputation of bouncing back and not letting, losing streaks become particularly long this season. Their longest is 2 that they suffered a couple of weeks ago. So they suffered in weeks 3 and 4 when Herbert was injured. So they haven't, lost more than one game outside of that the whole season. So, I think as far as bouncing back, I do think they're capable of doing it. Little concerned about the injuries heading into this game, but I do trust the Chargers to kind of find some of the holes in the Bucs offense. I'll say they win 27-24.
Okay, so right on the number. Okay.
Yeah, right around the number.
Yeah. And give me last one is what's your overall take on Harbaugh at this point? Fans, anything that has happened behind the scenes or just on a day-to-day basis that maybe fans outside of the Chargers haven't picked up on? I'm assuming everybody is just ecstatic, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, has he pretty much been as advertised and there's absolutely no complaints, or are there any minor issues or questions that the fans have had so far?
Yeah, no, I mean, for the most part, I think everyone thinks he's been great. He is absolutely getting a higher performance out of this team than another coach would have, right? Or like if you talk about like average coaching hire, I think he's definitely brought some of that Harbaugh year one bump that you saw with, all the other places he's been at. So I definitely think from that standpoint, the people that he's brought in on staff, from Michigan, picking out, kind of the best college and pro talent and melding it into that staff, I think has been exactly what people have expected. So I think he's been as advertised. I think there still is a little bit of like a culture shock, like on a game day when it comes to, like those coaching decisions, situationally, because, he has to play things a little bit differently in the pros than he did at Michigan, right? Michigan and Big Ten football in general is a lot of, field position hunting and, low score games. It's, that is the, culture of football they play in the Big Ten. And I do think in the NFL, I think that style of game management will have to change a little bit, as we saw against the Chiefs and some of the points and opportunities he left on the board. But ultimately, outside of that, I mean, he's been great. I mean, there's been no minor complaint other than maybe that one.
So sort of like the opposite of Dan Campbell. He coaches
a little bit. I don't expect Harbaugh to be Dan Campbell, right?
No.
It's not.
He's not going to go for 4th and 1 at his own 30.
Yeah, it's not necessarily in his nature, although you saw his brother against him in the Ravens game. He
did that.
He 4th and 1 on his own 16 early in that game. If he turns it over, right, the Chargers could go up 10-0, and he took that chance, right? So I do think those moments, not that I would say Harbaugh's been out-coached, but I would say Harbaugh in those moments sometimes can be out-aggressed, if you want to say something like that, where I do still think he's kind of feeling out, okay, when do I trust my offense? When do I trust my defense a little bit?
Well, there should be some bigger games ahead to find out how he does trust his offense and defense. That's for sure. Starting this week. What's that?
2 games in 5 days because they play the Thursday nighter as well.
That's right. And they're scheduled with the Denver Broncos in a very big game for both teams. So both teams are sitting there at 6 and 7 in the AFC playoff picture. And now if they win, they give themselves some breathing room if one of them loses. Mm-hmm. But if something happens where if they both lose, then boy, does that become an even bigger matchup on Thursday with the Dolphins and potentially the Colts breathing down their neck. So anyway, I look forward to getting the opportunity, Alex, to talking to you again right around playoff time or maybe during the playoffs because I do know the Chargers will get there. Yeah, I know I could be I could be that confident because I'm not a Charger fan. So hopefully I'm not jinxing you guys. Yeah. But it's just the confidence that I had even in the beginning of the season when I thought they'd be a playoff team. And that's exactly where I think they're headed. So we'll have links in the description for all of Alex's work where you can check out his content as well as your video work hosting the Bolt Breakdown show. How often do you do that, Alex?
once a week in the season, the day after game days. So do about a 30-minute show, 30-minute podcast recapping some of my thoughts on the game.
So you'll be back again on Monday to wrap up the Tampa Bay game.
Yep. And then also on Friday.
On Friday. 2 next week.
Yeah, 2 this week. Yeah.
Yes. And then you get a week off.
Yeah.
Alex, I appreciate it as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.